Jack Kloppenburg, a professor of community and environmental sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's also the director of the Greenhouse Residential Learning Community and is affiliated with the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and Agroecology. He's also a key figure in the establishment of the Open Source Seed Initiative, which we'll be hearing about. And he's the author of many things also, and including First the Seed, which I think is an all-time classic in critical agrarian studies.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, citizens. Thanks for coming here today. It is way cool to be here, I must say, to be around a bunch of people who take a look at this World Social Forum slogan. You know, I think probably we all believe that another world is desirable. Whether it's possible or not is something else again. And if it's possible, we're going to have to figure it out and build it. And here I'm going to start with what Henry had to say in his paper, which is the classic question of political sociology. What is to be done, by whom, and how? For me, what is to be done is to recover, in my work, to recover seed sovereignty, which has been appropriated by the corporations, in service of something that we might provisionally call food sovereignty. That's cool with me. I'm good with that. Sustainability and all kinds of things work in a variety of ways. To recover food sovereignty through seed sovereignty. How? Or with whom? With the Open Source Seed Initiative, which is a group of us principally from the United States, North America, a couple of Global South representatives. How? By using what Audre Lorde, the poet, would call a tool of the master. Famously, she said, the tools of the master will never dismantle the master's house. Now, I don't know that that's the case, and it would be a form of determinism to assume that the tool will do this one way or another. But we're going to use a tool called licensing, which is different from intellectual property rights, which is contract law, which is a tool of the master to try and turn it around and use licensing to enforce the sharing of genetic materials rather than their exclusion. Now, that sounds good. But running that by some of, if there's going to be a global movement, another world, we're going to have a whole range of allies across the world in a whole range of ways. How does that sound to people in the global south, or in fact, people in the global north who've been opposing GMOs and a variety of things? What I'm trying to figure in the paper that I did is where is the articulation of a particular group with a particular objective from the north, focused on plant breeding. How are we going to fit that? Can we fit that in somehow to food sovereignty? What seems to be a good platform, seeds, right? I mean, if there's one thing that farmers in Nicaragua and Iowa share, whichever way they're planting corn, increasingly it's a confrontation with a set of the gene giants, and there's 6 of them. No, it's not just the gene giant. There's another tier of fairly large and significant companies who want to separate them from the capacity to produce and reproduce their own seed, and have promulgated, with the support of a whole range of states and international organizations, a whole range of laws and registrations, from intellectual property rights principally in the United States to the Common Catalog to phytosanitary regulations all over the place. But there is a potential common point of view among all kinds of farmers around the world, and indeed plant breeders too, who find their own operations constrained by intellectual property rights and by monopoly, and they can't access the materials that they want and need to produce the varieties that they would like to provide to the world's farmers. Now, we're all probably familiar with what the problem is concentration in intellectual property rights. There's Phil Howard's very nice seed industry structure in Monsanto, Syngenta, DuPont. I mean, concentration, right? And you're probably familiar with patents. Plant breeders' rights patents in the United States take another step forward, and in Europe to some extent, not to the same extent as in the US, of saying that there's not only no farmer exemption, there's no research exemption. So it shuts it all down and encloses the genetic materials in a way that you're probably familiar with and figure Monsanto and that kind of thing. But I want to point out how far monopoly power has proceeded. That it has gone so far that in the United States, if you're growing corn and soybeans, there's really nowhere to go but to the gene giants. And that provides them with a whole other area of law to use, which is licensing. That's what this thing is. Seminis is saying here, Seminis is a Monsanto subsidiary. Big beef is not patented. It isn't even intellectual, it doesn't even have PBRs. But if you open that packet, on the other side is something like the shrink wrap license for software that says, You open this packet, you fuck with these seeds in any way, and you're in deep shit. That's essentially what that says. There's where we are. Farmers are not buying seed. They're purchasing a license that gives them a right to use, not even to buy, rather than buying the right to use. Now, that's a license. That's contract law. That's increasingly, that's what farmers who are growing corn and soybeans face. You get a big bag, and there's a 6-page technology use agreement attached to it. They don't even need the intellectual property rights anymore. Whoa, no lie. The free and open software movement has taken that license and turned it around and said, we'll use a license to enforce sharing rather than exclusion. And we will say, do anything you want with this software, mess around with it, share it, put it out there. We only put one restriction on your freedom, that you provide the same freedom to anybody else that you give this material to, this software to, that code to. That does two things. It is viral, it propagates throughout wherever that stuff goes, whatever it gets mixed with, and it creates a protected commons. Not an open access commons, not a public domain that anybody can take anything out of, but a protected commons that Microsoft can't enter, because if they mix their code with anything, it goes into the protected commons, and they've got to share it. Same thing's going down. Can we apply this in plant breeding and to genetic resource exchange? We're doing that with Aussie. We have plant breeders, we got farmer breeders, we've got students. We don't have many farmers because there aren't many farmer breeders. We've got a seed company, we've got some allies in the NGO community to hopefully be a social movement and to use this as a platform to provide a protected space for the development of lines for agroecological purposes, and to use the capacity, creative capacities of farmers in participatory plant breeding. There's plenty of breeders in the South, farmer breeders in the South. There ain't none in the North. Look at all that wasted creative capacity there. There aren't enough plant breeders, scientific plant breeders in the world to provide varieties and cultivars for the range of ecological niches that we're going to need to get to a true agroecology. We need farmers. That's where sustainability is. That's where food sovereignty is going to be. That's where seed sovereignty is going to be. That's where the creativity has got to come from that's going to support the cultivar development for the future. Can we mix it with food sovereignty? Can our plant breeders fit? It's uncertain. In the Global South, our friends say, dude, that's a license. We don't want any part of that. That's the kind of registration, the kind of property rights orientation, the kind of seeing like a state rather than a peasant that we got to get away from. We're not sure about this at all.